Today, we are going to extend our Next.js and Supabase application called Brainwave here to perform various CRUD operations, add some loading state, add some more server actions, and do some other cool stuff. Now, there is a prerequisite to this video, and you're going to have to watch at least video 2 of this series. I would recommend starting with video 1 of this playlist so you can add authentication as well. But in video 2, I give you a starter project that contains the auth setup, but then we go ahead and create our table in our Supabase database, and we get kind of everything set up and connected to Supabase. So make sure that you watch video 2. I think it's about a 10-minute video before watching this, because that will set up our database and our Supabase connections and all that stuff. And then in this video, we can just focus on extending that functionality into our CRUD application. Now, that is if you're following along and doing the code yourself. If you're just kind of watching this to see how CRUD is added to a Supabase Next.js application, then great. You could just watch this video and learn some stuff along the way. So let's head over to VS Code here. And to start adding CRUD to our application, the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to extend our notes actions here. So within our app directory, within our notes folder here, in parentheses, notes folder, because we're going to actually add another notes folder here later that's not in parentheses, not the best folder structure, I must admit, but this is what we're rocking with. There's going to be a final project linked in the description below as well if you want to see the final project. But let's go to this actions folder, and we already, in our previous video, we added the ability to create a new note with this create note action. But here in today's video, I want to add update as well as delete, because we're going to finish off adding the full CRUD functionality. So what we're going to do is add export async function update note. It's going to accept our form data just like our other functions. We're going to say const Supabase is equal to await create action client, which we already import at the top of this file right here from our util Supabase action, which we added quite a while back. And then once we have that, we're going to do const open a pair of curly braces data. And then we're going to do some more destructuring. We're going to destructure the user from our data property. And we're going to set that to equal await supabase.auth.get user. So get the currently authenticated user here. And then we'll just do a quick check here. If there's not a user, then we'll just redirect to the login page. But assuming that there is a user here, we're going to say const ID is equal to casting it to a string, get our form data dot get our ID, and then we'll have a little fallback of an empty string here. And then I'm on a Mac here as well. I'm going to do option shift down arrow to copy this down 2 more times, because we're going to get an ID. We're going to get a title from our form data. And then we're also going to get content from our form data. So ID, title, and content. We'll do a quick check. If there's not an ID or there's not a title, let's redirect. And we'll add this route in a second, but I'm going to use backticks. It's going to be notes $$ curly brace ID. Redirect them back to our notes details page, which we are going to create here in a second. And from here, we're going to say const error is equal to await Supabase dot from. So from our notes table that we already have set up, we're going to dot update our title and our content that equals ID is going to be ID, and then .eq again, user ID and user.id. So basically what we're saying here is that from our notes table, I want you to update the title and content rows from the row that has the ID of the notes ID from our form data, and then for the user from our user ID. So for the currently authenticated user, from the specific note ID that they're trying to update the title and content from the notes table is effectively what we're saying here. We could definitely do something with the error. We could throw an error. We could check if there's an error, redirect, check for different types of errors and stuff. But for now, we're not going to worry too much about it. We might revisit this here later in our project, but right now, let's just call revalidate path, dashboard, option shift down arrow. And then we're also going to revalidate our notes ID page. And as this is for the same reasons that we did earlier when we went over revalidate path, we're just going to make sure that we are clearing that cache out so we're not showing stale data and making sure that we are showing the updated data to the user. So this should be our update note, and that should be everything working correctly here. But let's also do an export async function, delete note, accepting form data. And then we're going to do a pretty similar thing that we did up here. So I'm going to copy the first 3 lines here of our update note function. So connecting to Supabase here, getting our user, if not user redirect. And then actually we will grab this const ID is equal to string form data.get ID, because we will delete a note by ID. If there is not an ID, we will just go ahead and redirect to the dashboard page, but then we will await Supabase.from our notes table. We're going to call the .delete method, and we are going to delete the note that is equal to, so .eq, the ID is our notes ID, and then also make sure it's only from our user ID that matches our user.id. So what this is saying is that from our notes table, I want you to delete the row where the ID matches our form data ID. This is going to be the specific note that we want to delete, the ID of the note, but then only delete it if the user ID matches the currently authenticated user. And then here we're going to do a similar thing. We're going to revalidate the dashboard, but then I'm going to do option shift down arrow. And then we're also going to redirect them back to the dashboard, because where we're going to use this is on a notes detail page. And if they're on the notes detail page, but then we delete the note for that detail page, well, there's not really any details to show about that note because it's already deleted. So we'll redirect them to the dashboard. This will probably make more sense once we see this in action, but those are our server actions for updating a note as well as deleting a note. We can actually, let's just completely get rid of this const error. We might use it later, but if we do, we will address it at that point, just to make these look a little bit cleaner. So that is updating a note and deleting a note from our table. But now let's go add that notes detail page. So within our app directory, add a new folder called notes, then add a new folder within that folder, square bracket ID square bracket. So this is going to be a dynamic route. And then within this dynamic route, let's add a page.jasx. So within the square bracket ID square bracket, add a new page.jasx file. And then as we've done previously, since this is a lot of Tailwind CSS class names and JSX that gets converted into HTML, we're going to copy and paste from the final project. So go ahead and go to the final project link below, copy this notes ID page.jsx, and then we're going to paste it in here, but then I'm going to talk you through all the important logic. So we pasted in our notes detail page here. And what we do at the top of the page is we first check, okay, is the user authenticated? If they're not, I want you to redirect them to the login page. This is this line of code right here that we've seen previously in this application. This function returns the current user, and then we can connect to Supabase. So const Supabase is equal to await to create client. We're importing create client from our Supabase utils, and this is a server page. We do import a couple of client components, but this is a server page. And then we say const ID is equal to await params, which is important because params is now async in Next.js. So you need to make sure to await your params, and then we get the current ID. We get the ID from our params because in our notes folder, our square bracket ID square bracket basically means that we are expecting to navigate to this page with a path that looks like notes / and then some ID matching our notes ID. So it might be, some number that we're going to navigate to. And then based on this notes ID, that's added in our params of our URL here. And we're going to walk through all this in our actual running application, but we're going to navigate to say notes/3. Then on our params object, that's going to have a property that matches our folder name. So it's going to be an ID property that is going to match the number 3. And then based on that note ID, we're then going to get that note from our database. So we're going to say const data, and then we're renaming that to note, is equal to await Supabase from our notes table. We're going to select our ID, title, content, updated at, created at, and user ID. But we're going to get the note that matches our params ID. So the ID that is equal to the ID from our params here. And then we're only going to get that single note. So in this dynamic route here in Next.js, we're going to get the ID of the note from our params of our URL. And then based on that ID, we're going to get that single note from Supabase. If there's not a note, we're going to return calling not found from next navigation. If for some reason the note user ID does not equal the user ID, we're going to redirect to dashboard. However, our row level security that we already added should already block this. So it's just kind of like a just in case. And then we add a bunch of just kind of styles and JSX here. We include our last updated, which is our note.updated at. And then here we get into some logic for our delete button. So in our components here, you're going to see we haven't added this confirm button at this point, but we're going to add that in a second. What this is basically going to do is this is a form and our action is set to our delete note server action that we already added. So here, this is our delete note server action that we just added right here. So what we're doing within this page is we're basically saying when the button of type submit, this confirm button, is clicked, we're going to trigger this delete note server action. Now we are going to create a confirm button here in just a second. Let's actually just create that right now. Within our components folder, create a new file called confirm button.jsx. And then you guessed it, let's copy and paste from the final project, and then I'll walk us through it. So basically it is a client component. So put use client up at the top. It needs to be a client component because we're using a React hook, and then also we're handling an on click. So anytime you do that, it has to be a client component because we're handling user action and we're using React features like use form status. We pass it a few props. We use the use form status hook like we have earlier to check if the form is still pending or not. So we can add some cool little animation here as well. But then we set this button to type submit. Now on click, we're going to call window.confirm with our confirm text, which is basically going to send a alert. You could do this much differently as well. You could create like your own custom confirm modal and stuff like that. But for the sake of this, this was probably easiest. And then when they do confirm it, it will proceed and we'll submit our form. Now coming back to our page, we just need to make sure to import our confirm button from app_components confirm button, which if you copy and pasted, it's probably already imported like that, but just make sure that that is correctly imported and you have created that confirm button. And it's totally fine to import a client component into a server component like this. That is not going to cause any issues. Next.js is still going to render this server side, but it's going to keep this little slot open to render our client component. And then similarly, we have an edit form down below that has our input for our title, input for our content. It includes a link to where if they want to cancel the edit, then they can click cancel and then we return them to our dashboard page. But then we also use our submit button that is of type submit. And when they click this, and we already created our submit button earlier, but when they click this, it is going to trigger the server action of update note, which we import right here from our actions folder to where we will then update our note when they click on this submit button right here. And then that's really it for that page. Now I do want to add, just like what we did earlier, within our ID folder, let's add a new page that's loading.jsx. And then we're going to just export default function, a really simple loading note page that's going to return a div with loading note. And then I'm just going to copy the class name from our final project. You can just copy and paste this component as well. Basically, when they go to our notes ID page, we're going to show just a little bit of UX here saying, hey, we're loading the note. Now, like I said earlier, in some of our other loading pages that we added, like for our dashboard, this is basically just a placeholder for, you could definitely extend this and like render out a loading skeleton for a note. Like you could ask ChatGPT, like, hey, could you create a skeleton loader that kind of looks like this notes page, but then just show a loading skeleton to the user so they kind of get an idea of what the UI is going to look like before they even see their rendered note? I think that would be pretty cool, but that's kind of out of the scope of what I want to do here. So for now, just have a nice, simple loading page. And with all this in place, that should give us our notes detail page. It should give us the loading state. It should give us a delete button as well as an update form. And then the only other thing that we want to do here is within our dashboard page. If you scroll down, you're going to see this notes list right here. I want you to replace that with what we have in our final project, because basically what I want to do here is when we render out our list of notes in our dashboard page, I want to add an ability to delete a note within our dashboard page. And then also I want to add the ability to navigate to our notes details. So from the final project, I want you to copy and paste our new logic, starting up here at our notes list comment down to this parenthesis curly brace. So I'm going to paste that in as well. Now that we've pasted that in here, it should look pretty similar. We're still mapping over our notes here, but one major difference is that now we're adding a link tag here, importing that from next link, in which our href is set to /notes/ our note.id. So in our dashboard page, when they click on a note, it's going to link them to our notes details page at /notes/ the note ID. So we're adding that to our query parameters here. So then when they go to that page, that note ID is accessible on our params.id that we already kind of set up there. And then also we add a delete button to each note. So within the dashboard page, they'll be able to delete a note here. Just make sure that you've already imported this delete note from our actions like so. So then while they're viewing a list of their notes, they can decide to delete one, and then we render out their content as well as the updated at as well. So with all this in place, I should be able to, and I'm already running my project via npm run dev, but I think we should have everything in place now to where if we come back here, I'm going to do a hard refresh just to make sure, because we wrote a lot of code here. We're going to see if I broke anything. I wouldn't be surprised if we did. But let's go to the login page. I'm going to log in with a user that I've already added. If you don't have a user, make sure to create a user via create account and create a user, and then make sure you're logged in with him. But I'm going to sign in with a current user that I already have. And here I see that I have not imported my confirm button for my dashboard page. So I need to make sure for dashboard, import the confirm button from our components here. And then now if I come back, we see our dashboard page here. I have already created a few different notes. You can definitely create some more notes here. So I'm going to do test 4 and then a bunch of gibberish, save note, and you should see that note populate as well. We already added that functionality, but the new functionality is we should be able to click delete here and delete a note. So I'm going to try to delete this note here. It says, do you want to delete this note? I'm going to click OK. This is kind of the window.confirm that we added here. And then we see that note is deleted. Let's test and make sure. Delete, OK, deleting, and then it removes that note because we revalidate this dashboard after deleting a note, which is pretty neat. But now if I click on the title of the note, it should link me to /notes/ the ID of the note, which is good. And then we see we render out this note here. So what just happened there, and let's just do this again. Let's do back to dashboard. I'm going to click test note. You're going to see loading note here, and just for a split second, you see a loading note there. And that's where you could customize that into a loading skeleton. But that's basically showing our UI here from our notes /ID loading.jsx page here. But then when we click on a note, it navigates us to /notes/ that note ID. And it does that because in our dashboard page, around our title, I wrap a link component where the href is equal to /notes/ whatever the ID of that note is. So it navigates us to /notes/ that ID, which is why you see this URL /notes/ID. And then here we have a notes folder within our app directory with a dynamic ID route. So square bracket ID square bracket within this page.jsx. We get the ID from the params. So we're getting this ID right here from the params. And then we're using that ID to get a single note from our database that matches that ID. And then we render out this edit note as well as delete note UI to where here, let's test this out. Let's see if this works. So I'm going to say test note, and I'm going to just put dash update. And then let's also update the content here. I'm going to say updated content so we can see this. I'm going to click save changes. It says saving. I assume that we've saved our changes now because it looks like, let me refresh this page and see if anything's changed. I refresh. Okay. It looks like our updates have remained. Let's go back to dashboard. And okay, it looks like we have successfully updated our note here because we're seeing it as we should, updated with the updates we made. Now, what if I click cancel here? It just takes me back to our dashboard. I think that's reasonable UX. And then what if I delete from our update notes page? And this is where I was talking about earlier, to where I said in our actions, when we delete, I want to redirect to our dashboard page. Because if I delete this note and then they just stay on this page, well, they're not going to see anything because we no longer have a note associated with this ID because we deleted it. So if I click delete here, it gives me a confirmation. I think that's reasonable as well. If I click OK, it says deleting, navigates us back to dashboard, and we no longer see that note existing. So let's run through this one more time. I'm going to say brief note, optional content, save note, new note is saved. Let's go to this other note here, click on it, test 3. I'm going to change this to test 4. I'm going to fix my typo here in testing and just put testing, save changes. Let's go back to dashboard. We see the updated note. Let's click into it again. And then let's delete this note. So we should only see one note here, and we do. So it looks like we've successfully added CRUD functionality to our Brainwave application. So pretty cool, if you ask me. Now, that's going to do it for this video because we've fully added the CRUD operations like we wanted to. But stay tuned for the other videos of this series because we're now going to add some cool additional AI features to this application. So I'll see you in that next one.